It's time for the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer and Bruce Zeman.
Shoots! He scores!
And now, with a trip around the National Hockey League, here's Jim and Bruce.
And welcome to the Full Press Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Biringer, voice of Full Press Hockey, joined once again by my legendary tag team partner, Fox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. We are back, baby.
Jim, it's good to be with you. This is the first time I've done the show live from Lewis Beach, Delaware. We've relocated, still doing a ton of stuff for Vox, which is a fantastic company, but sitting by the beach today, it's 82 degrees, and when you and I are done, I'll be on the beach.
Yes, baby, that's it. It's about 85 degrees here. Maybe I'll go outside, catch some rays as well while I'm relaxing before the Stanley Cup playoffs continue on a Thursday night, and I think that's where we should begin. I know we have coaching things to talk about. We have Devils things to talk about, Bruins things to talk about, but I think we start this around the NHL segment. Brought to you by Bet Analytics. Use the promo code FPH24, get 25% off. Great gaming site for you guys that like to bet and wager. So check those guys out, Bet Analytics. We'll drop them a line here. Let's start with the Stanley Cup playoffs. Let's start with a team that we highlighted a lot this year, a goaltender we highlighted a lot this year, who thought would be good in New Jersey, and he came up short for the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm talking about Connor Hellebuyck. 24 goals in 5 games, 5.23 goals against average, .870 save percentage, just not good enough in 5 games against Colorado Avalanche.
No, absolutely not. And one of the things we've talked about for the last year and a half is that the postseason is what it's all about. We had a similar conversation last year about Linus Ullmark and the Boston Bruins, and this year it's about Connor Hellebuyck. Had a great regular season. I think you'll agree with me, Jim, that he is a presumptive, and I don't want to say it's a sure thing, but a lot of people would vote for him as the Vezina Trophy winner during the regular season, but he did not have a good postseason.
No, he did not, and I would agree with you on that. I had a hand in helping with one of our guys at Full Press Hockey, Murray Pam, Professional Writers Association, who was able to submit a ballot on our behalf this year. Had an input with him, and we both agreed that Connor Hellebuyck was going to win the Vezina Trophy this year. Again, Sergei Bobrovsky, Thatcher Demko. Think about it. Demko's not playing in the playoffs, played 1 game. Hellebuyck struggled, and Bobrovsky's got his team to the second round. But again, look, he even said it. Look, he said it today here on Thursday during the Jets media availability. He wants to change his mindset a little bit. He feels like he puts too much pressure on himself. He shoulders too much of the load, and he doesn't play enough of a team game. Not to say he doesn't play a team game, but I think he feels the responsibility more as a goaltender to carry the team and get them further. If he's changing that mindset, that's telling me he's learning from this experience, because he did get pulled in Game 4. But I can't blame all of this on Connor Hellebuyck. Think about it. The Jets were the best defensive team in the National Hockey League in the regular season. They won the Jennings Trophy, and their defense completely went to crap against Colorado Avalanche in 5 games. Like, you can't be giving up 5 goals a game. You can't do that. And not to mention, go back to Game 1. You're up 6-3 and 7-4. You should close those games out like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You can't have collapses like that in the playoffs. 5.23 goals against in the playoffs for Connor Hellebuyck, which is not good enough. And I hope he learns from this. Again, one of the things that we had alluded to earlier this season with a bunch of different players, not just Connor Hellebuyck. We talked about it with regard to some of the players on the Devils now. More money, better team, higher expectations. And if we're being honest, he just didn't meet them.
No, he didn't, and neither did the Winnipeg Jets. Though Rick Bowness did have a different tune this year. When we discussed it last year, Rick Bowness ripped into his team saying there was no heart. They didn't, there was not enough pushback. We thought there was going to be a lot of turmoil this year. He said this was the best that they've played in the playoffs in 2 years as he's been there. But think about it, going back to the bubble, 2021, the Jets have now lost 3 straight postseason series, 4 straight games. Now they've done that. Back-to-back postseason failures after winning the first game. not good enough. I mean, for a team that prided itself on defense, where there was a stretch during the regular season, 34 straight games where they gave up 3 goals or less. I mean, look, we know Colorado can push the pace, but entering the playoffs, it was Hellebuck was going to be better than Georgiev, and it was the other way around.
Well, it absolutely was the other way around, and it wasn't really even close. You know, it was amazing the way Colorado kind of just shut Winnipeg down. And even when in those games that Winnipeg was leading, you never really got the sense that those games were in the bag for Winnipeg. You just never got the feeling that they were going to close those games out. And that's one of the things I think they have to work on, kind of like the shutdown, close it out mentality. If you take a look back to the Devils, 93, 94, even 2000, when the Devils got up, you kind of knew that those games were over. I mean, granted, you had the trap back then, but I mean, these different era, different type of hockey now, and Winnipeg just did not bring what Colorado brought in this first round.
No, and not to mention Winnipeg special teams not great as well. Penalty kill operating at 37%. Not good enough against the Colorado power play that just dominated in the playoffs. And think about it. Shout out to Colorado for what they've done. Like, you have Nathan McKinnon, you have Mikko Rantanen, but Arturi Lehkonen is back to what he was. Having Valerie Nichushkin back is huge for this team. I mean, what Joe Sakic and Chris McFarland have done with this team and adding Casey Middlestat, they are really deep again. Would not shock me if we get Colorado, Edmonton in a conference final.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought that it was a solid job by the Avalanche. And, again, hopefully Winnipeg learns from this. It would be a little bit concerning to me. I know Rick Bowness said all the right things and everything like that. But, again, to me, the thing that will concern me just a little bit, I mean, you're at this point where you're being paid like one of the best goaltenders in the world, and come playoff time, you need to play like that. And he just didn't.
No, he didn't. And Rick Bowness did address his future today. He said, you'll know when I know. And, there's a team option on his contract. So we know what they did under Scott Arniel when Bowness was taking care of family matters. And we wish him all the best with that as well here at Full Press, the hockey podcast. But, Winnipeg's out. We saw LA leave. Edmonton's power play is just ridiculous what they do. I mean, matchups, again, not really great. I mean, you saw it with Washington and the Rangers. I mean, the Rangers are the best team, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. They take care of business. Carolina handles their business against the Islanders. And look, that series was a lot closer than 5 games because the Islanders had chances to win games and they just couldn't close it out. And again, it speaks to the Islanders and an older team and a team that needs more scoring. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I mean, in that series between Carolina and the Islanders, the Hurricanes also got some really good goaltending, and the Islanders had some moments where there were solid goaltending, but there were also some moments where it wasn't, and so the Islanders, they hung in there, but I mean, Carolina to me was clearly the better team. Although I will say the Islanders did put a little fear in them at the end there.
They did. I mean, they had chances, like I said. But when you give up in 2 games, you give up 2 goals in 9 seconds in 2 games. I mean, that's not good enough. Freddie Anderson made 2 series-changing saves in Game 3. I mean, look, Carolina was a better team. They're going to go to war with the New York Rangers. No, again, part of my language. I know what's going on in the world these days, but it's going to be a battle in round 2 between the New York Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes, 2 of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And in the East, we're seeing the weaker teams being weeded out. Florida takes care of Tampa. And I'm not saying Tampa's a weak team, but they haven't been themselves in years. And there's a new bunch in the block there. And the big question around Tampa is Steven Stamkos. What do you think he does? What do you think the team does? Do you think he stays or do you think he finds a new home?
I think it would be a mistake for them to let him leave. I think, just like, and we've talked about this many times, I think it was a terrible move on the Devils organization to let Marty ever play for another organization. I think that was awful that ever happened. Granted, there were 2 sides, but sometimes when somebody brings you 3 championships, you have to do things to make it right. I think Stamkos will stay. I think maybe he's putting it out there to put a little pressure on the team to just get this done. I'd be surprised if he leaves, and I think it'd be one of those things where, is he going to go? Where's he going to go? I mean, Toronto's been. I mean, every Toronto is rumored.
And everybody,
and everybody, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
I mean, you want him to have this, illustrious career and have then 3 years in Toronto. I mean, he's still playing at a high level, absolutely, but I think he stays. But I also think that he's got to realize too that he may have to take a hometown discount to make that happen.
Look, I mentioned an article I wrote the other day that, Kopitar in LA, he went from 10 to 7.5 as a discount, but Steven Stamkos is still putting up 40 goals. You could argue that his discount is 8.5.
And it very well could be. But I mean, you really saw, I mean, Florida really took apart Tampa in that first round, and they really did it methodically. And so I think if you're Steven Stamkos, you may have to go to management and sit down with them and say, or sit down together and say, we need a bunch of things. And if they're honest, I mean, I would hope they would be. And they said that we have to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, he may have to meet them in the middle because that team did not look good against Florida.
No, they did. I mean, look, game 2, Bobrovsky makes that save, that series-changing save, and they lose in overtime. The power play, Nikita Kucherov, who was pretty much the best player in the NHL regular season, was semi-non-existent in the series. Kudos to Florida, what they did. You have Carter Verhaeghe, Mr. Playoff, taking care of business, and the Panthers await the series between the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And here we go again with Boston. And before we get to the Boston Bruins, Austin Matthews is not playing in Game 6. He didn't play in Game 5. He had an illness. He tweaked something in Game 4. Now all of a sudden, he's missed these last 2 games, elimination games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Questions are going to start to be raised about what is going on in Toronto.
Well, it certainly raises a question of how serious it is. I mean, if you look at what happened with the Florida Panthers last year, Tkachuk played with like literally every part of his body broken.
Right.
Near the end. And so let's just hope for the Maple Leafs' sake and for Austin Matthews' sake that it's not something really serious, because I can't imagine he wouldn't be playing unless it's something
really serious. Right. And look, obviously he did have the illness. He played through it. But then you saw in period 2 of Game 4, he came up a lame towards the end of the period. He didn't play the third. Speculation, lower body, could be groin, could be knee, could be something. He's not skating well. There's reports that he can't really do much out there. I mean, that's a really significant blow to a team that's power play is not great. He's won the Rocket Richard and now in 2 elimination games. And they did win the last game in overtime, Matthew Nyes. But again, they struggle because in 11 of 13 games, they've scored 2 or less goals. But still, in the big game that they won to get it back home ice advantage, he was a dominant player. So you have to wonder what it is. And let's see if Toronto can shake more fear into the Bruins, because Jim Montgomery was not happy with the effort of the Boston Bruins in Game 5, and he's still not. He said he was pissed. He didn't understand or didn't comprehend how his team played so poorly in an elimination game when they were controlling this series. And now Boston has deja vu all over again.
Well, there's an old saying in sports in general that the longer you let a team that's on the brink stay in the game, the more of a danger that something bad is going to happen. And it could be a bad bounce. It could be a season-ending injury to one of your top players. You don't want to let them stick around because bad things happen. And let me just put this out there. If Toronto is able to somehow come back and win this series, I don't know how you don't have major changes in Boston.
I mean, we talked about it, when you were up in WVTK in Vermont, and we talked about it on this show as well. The question is, if the Boston Bruins do not get out of the first round, will there be major changes? Yes, well, we already know the goaltending is going to be different. We know Jeremy Swayman's going to get paid because he is the number 1 guy there. We know Linus Ullmark is going to get traded. Does Jake DeBrusk return? What happens to the coach? Management? There are a lot of question marks. We know they still need a number 1 center. There are a lot of question marks around this team, but Boston was in control in 3 of the 4 games, and they allowed Toronto to go back home and bring them with them. And we know what Swayman has done. He didn't play a bad game 5. He didn't. Toronto, again, only scored 2 goals and 1 in regulation. So he's doing his part. But Boston has to come out better in Toronto, where Toronto's lost 6 straight playoff games on home ice.
Yeah, I mean, all the pressure, really, if you think about it, all the pressure has kind of switched in this. I mean, there was talk near the end of the season, there still is talk about if Toronto, goes out, will Sheldon Keefe still be the coach? There was all this pressure on the Leafs but now with this Matthews thing, even though Leafs fans probably don't want to hear this, you do have to take that into account. If you're missing one of the best players in the world, that has to impact stuff. And the fact that they're hanging in there, I mean, the pressure, in my opinion anyway, as an analyst, has really switched from Toronto to Boston now, because if I'm the Boston Bruins, I do not want to play Toronto in a Game 7.
No, I don't either. I really don't. I don't want to do that because anything is possible. We know Leafs fans and their history of Game 7, even when they rally, they seem to come up short. But you mentioned Toronto. Look, whether their season ends in Game 6, whether it ends in Game 7, I do expect changes to happen with this roster. You cannot continuously run this team back. And I know they've had minor changes and they've brought in different guys, but it is time to break up this core 4. And somebody mentioned this the other day. Well, it's really not a core 4. It's really a core 2 because Tavares has 1 year left on his deal and Marner has 1 year left on his deal. But if they fall and they lose again on home ice with Sheldon Keefe behind the bench, you have to wonder if he's out as the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I think a lot of it depends on what happens in the playoffs. I mean, let's say that Toronto does lose this series. Because I do think Toronto's going to win tonight in Toronto. I do. If they take this to 7 games, missing Matthews, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah, maybe you do make changes, and I think that there's going to be changes with that core 4, as you said. But I mean, as much as you do want to bring change, I still think if you're missing arguably the best goal scorer in the world, you've got to give that some credence, especially the way Keefe has got them playing, in the last couple of games without him.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I just think, I mean, how many times can you just run back the same thing over and over again and get the same result?
Well, that's a great question. And there's a bunch of teams that are in the same situation. I mean, if you take a step back, let's look at Winnipeg again. I mean,
yeah.
Connor Hellebuyck is presumed to be the Vezina Trophy winner. I expect him to be, and he's supposed to be the best goalie in the world. Didn't happen.
No,
it didn't happen. So, do you just change something there, or do you just say, well, he's learning from this again? And we said this last week, or the last time you and I were together. What people have to remember is that this is a results-driven business, and it is a business above anything else. It's about the money. It's not about the game. If they could put a team on Saturn, they would.
Right? No, they would.
They absolutely would. And we won't get into expansion because I don't want to make your head come off. But I think Toronto's going to have to do something. It's just a question of what that is, and we'll get to it later. I mean, New Jersey's in the same situation. I mean, I actually don't even know where to start with that team. We'll get to that later.
No, we'll get to them later. And the thing is, you brought up Toronto, Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg makes changes too. Maybe Nikolai Ehlers isn't there. Maybe you move him out to grab something. Like in Toronto, maybe you move Mitch Marner out to get you a number 1 defenseman or a goaltender that you desperately need. Maybe you have that in Joseph Woll, but you need somebody to back him up because Joseph Woll, I think, is their number 1 goaltender. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Again, Winnipeg has to make changes. Toronto has to make changes. Again, nothing is happening in Toronto, but you said it's a results-oriented business, and a shout-out to our buddy Dave Pagnotta from the Fourth Period who's been on the show with us. It's a what have you done for me lately league, and we've seen a lot of coaches fired recently. Obviously, you look around the league, Dave Hackstall, Donnie Granato, David Quinn in San Jose. That one's a bit of a head-scratcher. I don't know about that one. but LA is going to make a coaching change. And then we saw, I think going back to last year, now we've had 17 coaches fired. And yes, Buffalo makes the coaching change. Don Granato's out, and you thought, they'll bring somebody else, but they go back to Lindy Ruff. What are we doing in Buffalo?
Jim, I've been following this game a long time, and when I saw that, I'm not really sure. I don't have an answer for you. I mean, maybe they think that he's a better fit with some of the players they have on the roster. To me, looking at this as an analyst and not a fan, the New Jersey Devils have a much, much better core of forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo Sabres do. And Lindy Ruff could not get them to win. I don't know what they are expecting him to do with a less talented lineup unless they just think he's a better organizational fit. I do not understand that move at all.
Well, I'll talk with somebody in Buffalo. They talked to 12 people. I don't know if they interviewed 12 people, but in 6 days, you were figured that Lindy Ruff was the best option when you've interviewed Craig Berube and several other coaches, prominent coaches out there. And you look at it, right? And we saw what Lindy Ruff was in year 1, and we saw what Lindy Ruff was in year 3. And then there was the Lindy Ruff with the Andrew Burnett year in New Jersey. And I think getting the right assistant coaches matter. Look, they have talent there. They don't have the talent New Jersey has. If he can start having play defense, great. Now, to be fair to Lindy Ruff, we said this on the podcast. Tom Fitzgerald, the general manager of the Devils, did not give him the tools in the toolbox to operate, but this team didn't play defense either. So what do you expect in Buffalo? Are you expecting 2 more years of not making the playoffs? That would be 15 years, straight years of not making the playoffs. That's not good enough.
No, it's not good enough unless unless he's a placeholder for someone that they've got their eye on in a year or two, whether it's a Mike Sullivan, whether it's, I'm just making this up, whether it's a Patrick Waugh, if that doesn't work out, and who knows? But I mean, what message does that send to your fan base? I guess we don't know what goes on in the room. We say that all the time, but I don't know what message that you're sending to your fan base other than that he was here before. Maybe he's a familiar voice, but that voice didn't work with a much more talented lineup. What do you expect to happen?
Right, exactly. That's what I don't get that one. So that one's a little bit of a head scratcher to me in Buffalo, what they did. Now, obviously, Seattle made a coaching change. They get rid of Dave Haxtell. San Jose made a coaching change. David Quinn's out. And those were kind of a bit of head scratchers to me. Now, reading between the lines in Seattle, I could see why, because we know what Ron Francis' connection is to Carolina. He brought in Rob Brendamore, and if Rob Brendamore doesn't stay in Carolina, maybe they make a play for him there. But the one in San Jose just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe you can shed some light on this for me, because that roster is not compatible to winning. They were tanking. They were not good. And I think I heard somebody use the line, I don't even think Scotty Bowman could get that team to win. So there's a lot of poor roster construction in San Jose, and to use David Quinn as a scapegoat, I'm not too sure about that.
Well, the San Jose Sharks have a sign on them that says fire sale.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what Mike Grier has been doing most of the season, moving players with value out. I look at it this way. I don't see that as an attractive job for anybody. I really don't. I mean, you have a basically a junior roster, and they're moving out anybody with any perceived value. I mean, maybe they're going to start a complete rebuild, but I kind of saw that coming because, they have to do something to placate the fans and say, hey, listen, we're doing this, but they don't have a talented roster. And as an analyst, I'm like, so what is your plan? Draft picks? What is the plan?
Right. I don't know what the plan is. We know what the plan is in Utah, because that team, we saw Arizona, a hybrid relocation / expansion. Everybody from management, all that, the players go to Utah, new franchise. We know the Coyotes are inactive and no one likes the owner. And the only way the team comes back is if the owner can get a building. and nobody is really sure he can do it because he's not very popular, and all the stories coming out of there are that he's cheap and he doesn't pay anybody and he tries to keep all his money as much as possible. So that's not a good sign. But you have Ryan Smith in Utah, and you say to yourself, okay, this guy, they're no longer is this team going to be a place for dumping ground for contracts. They're gonna want to win. And you know what? The players look rejuvenized and the coach looks rejuvenized. And I would not be surprised if this Utah franchise makes noise in their first season.
Well, it's amazing what can happen with a franchise when the whole organizational vibe is to win. Taking a step back to New Jersey, a team you and I have followed for years.
Mm-hmm.
The Devils had that vibe for a long time before Jacques Lemaire came in the 90s. And when Jacques Lemaire came in, the Lou Lamoriello brought in the whole mentality from the Montreal Canadiens that it's not okay to win, it's expected to win. And we expect to win and compete. And like Lou Lamoriello or not, all the guy did when he was there was win.
Yep.
And he's got, they've got 3 cups, they had five appearances. They should have had 4 cups, in my opinion, but we'll leave that for later. But again, I think the NHL did a terrible job with the whole Arizona thing. I think they were there 3 years longer than they should have been. And my only
I would say 5 years. I would say 5 years longer than they should have been.
5. But my listen, and I'm excited for the folks in Utah that they're going to get an AHL team. But again, I understand it's a business, and folks have to understand this. It's a business before anything else. If you think these people care about the game, you're wrong. They care about making money. That's what the most important thing about this is. If you're looking at this from a fan, or even as an analyst for the fan, in my opinion, there are 2 or 3 other cities that should have gotten this franchise before Utah did. And the big one for me is Quebec. I don't understand how there's not a team in Quebec, a team with a rabid hockey fan base. And, and again, the fact that the owner of the Coyotes is even able to have the possibility of having a franchise again is just stupefying to me. I mean, he ran that franchise into the ground. You have a professional sports team that is 4th in North America to begin with, running a professional franchise out of a college hockey rink.
Mm-hmm.
How is that okay?
It's not okay.
With your branding or your marketing, you're supposed to be a major sport, a major sports league. Okay? And again, I understand it's all about money, but you basically propped up this franchise that people don't care about, I shouldn't say that not enough people care about.
Right.
For 5 years, because there are people in Arizona that I'm sure
I mean, you feel bad for the fans because they're losing a team. But let's be honest, ownership, the PR, all the negativity around this team really didn't help this team. They never built off any of their success. You go to a Western Conference final and you don't make the playoffs again until the bubble, which was 9 years later, 8 years later. Like, it's not – it was time. It needed to happen. Morello just didn't operate things. Yeah, it was cool to see a team in a college arena for 1 year, but Gary Bettman finally had pushback from the Players Association because I have this on good authority that Marty Walsh was like, this has to end. Like, this has to end. The new executive director of the PA said, players are fed up. We're talking about money was involved, HRR. We're not getting enough from it. We need to go to another place. And for the first time, Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, was like, yeah, you're right. Like, he knew it was over. Like, he's like, all right, yeah. Because usually he would push back and say things. He was content to just let Marty Walsh talk. And guess what? The PA won this one. And I think everybody knew, for the sake of the league, for the sake of the salary cap, for the sake of revenue, when money's involved, you have to make a change.
Well, and money has been involved for years. And again, if you look at it, let's talk about money for a second, okay? I think they said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, I think they said that Utah had 22,700 season ticket deposits.
I think that's up to like 30,000 now.
All right, let's make it 30,000. What do you think that number would be in Quebec?
Double.
Okay.
If not triple.
Okay. So again, and I get it, but I mean, in a league that they propped up a franchise that really was not even relevant for 5 years, half a decade.
Yeah.
And yet all of a sudden they're able to move it like that to Utah.
Right.
Like that.
Exactly. Like that. Exactly.
So
it's going to be interesting to see what that franchise does. And one more thing before we get to the Devil segment here. We talk about change a lot. I have a theory, and I saw this theory out there, and I want to see, because it kind of ties into our Devil segment here. So there's a rumor, report, hypothesis. If the Leafs lose, Sheldon Keefe gets fired. That means Kyle Dubas will fire Mike Sullivan, which means Sheldon Keefe would go to Pittsburgh. Part of me says, yes, that could happen. Part of me is like, that would be the worst decision ever, because it's just the same mistake over again that Kyle Dubas is making with a franchise.
Well, I mean, anything's possible in the NHL, you know that. And you know, I mean, it's like the rumors that will not go away about Mike Sullivan potentially being the next coach of the Devils. Those won't go away either. In fact, I heard that this morning again, that those discussions are actually happening.
Yep.
Amongst other coaching candidates. But, you know, who knows? Who knows? Because, I mean, do you think that Kyle Dubas doesn't want to stick it to the Maple Leafs?
I think he does. And, you know, it'd be interesting to see that one. And, you know, we'll see what changes the Islanders make, too. We'll see if Lou's there and what kind of moves they make. But that's been our Around the NHL segment. Like we said, the last part of it ties into our Devils segment that we like to do to close the show all the time. And the New Jersey Devils, look, they need a new coach. We've talked about their needs on defense, goaltending, so on and so. Let's stick with the coach, because Tom Fitzgerald talked about team accountability, talking about a coach that brings in, you know, some experience. He may not have it, but he's got to be able to work with everybody, you know, analytics department. I think, personal opinion aside, I do not like the Devils analytics department. I think it's trash. I don't think they know what they're doing. And I think they rely on it way too much. They need to rely on the eye test more than they do. But that's my personal opinion as an analyst. I'm not in that room. However, the Devils need a coach that could get this team to play to its potential. We know what Craig Berube said about these players when he's been on TNT, TBS. If Mike Sullivan comes, he's a good coach. Rod Brindamore. But what we just outlined it for you in the last segment, comes down to money. And go check out our previous podcasts. How many times did we say the Devils had chances to get Gerard Gallant, Peter Laviolette, and didn't want to pay and had to settle for Lindy Ruff? You have to open a checkbook to get a coach.
Jim, everything you said is from my sources, validates what you just said. Okay. There's a time, in my opinion, when you're hiring somebody that management has to step in. I think Tom Fitzgerald has proven that there are areas in his arsenal that he needs to work on, a lot of them. If I'm the Devils owners, I'm going to overrule him on this. I'm going to say, I want you to hire X.
Yep.
And I think they need to hold him to that. Perception's reality. Being in the media, that's what it is. Perception is reality. So if you're telling your fan base that you had, and I'm not sold on Gerard Gallant as a coach.
Neither am I. No,
you know,
neither am I.
after you know, you and I have some mutual acquaintances that you know, we heard about Gallant's exit from the Rangers, which was not no bueno.
No, it was not pretty. Like, yeah, it wasn't pretty.
Not good. But if the perception of your organization is out there is that you're not going to pay what it takes to win, that's really not good.
No.
So if that's the perception that Fitzgerald put out there, management needs to say that's not the perception. And I'm not saying you have to break the bank for this, but if we're being honest here, he needs to get this right. And I don't mean just the GM, the franchise needs to get this right, because they botched the last coaching hire. This is my opinion as an analyst. I don't think Tom Fitzgerald is the right person to be the GM of that team. I think he proved it last year. I know a lot of people don't agree with me. But I personally would have him on a very, very short leash this year.
I think he knows it. And I think when we were on this last time together, I told you about the exit interviews and me. It looked like it, and it sounded like a guy who knew he had 1 year left of being a general manager with a franchise, because I think ownership realized, hey, you said we were going to be better. We didn't. We missed the playoffs, and we know what playoff revenue means. We need to step in and start looking at some things now, because he had free reign, and the team, they took a step backward in defense. That's fine. You want to get younger, all well and good, but you didn't get a number one goaltender. You need physicality. Didn't get that till it was too late. Fired your coach way too late. So you look at the coaching candidates out there. Craig Berube's out there, and I agree with some of the people that are out there, and I've talked to some people. If it was Berube, I think it would have been done already. I think New Jersey is waiting on what Pittsburgh does. I think Mike Sullivan is a legitimate candidate to be the Devils' next head coach, and I would not have a problem with that, considering what he did in Pittsburgh. But I know I might take slack for this. He doesn't have a talent like he has in Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby. As good as Jack Hughes is, he's not Sidney Crosby.
Not yet. He's not. No.
Not yet. He doesn't have Malkin either.
Or Malkin.
Letang. He doesn't have that on this team.
No.
He doesn't have that. And he doesn't have the goaltending. Tom Fitzgerald has to get the right coach. Look, we know John Cooper is going to be staying in Tampa. We don't know what the future is in Carolina of Rod Brindamore. He's also another good coach. I think he wants to stay in Carolina. I think they figure out a way to get it done. That means Tom McClellan's out there, Gerard Gallant, the usual suspects are out there. Do they go overseas? Because, you know, the White Whale, Karl Gromberg, was a candidate last time and they didn't get him. And I think the way the Devils were playing at that time, he would have fit the system. But if we're being honest, Sullivan's not available. I'm taking Craig Berube because I know what he can do with a franchise.
Let me throw this out there. This is a discussion I had yesterday afternoon. It's funny because I've lived in Delaware now for 3 days, and a lot of my neighbors are Flyers fans. We have some Capitals fans down here. And so someone said to me last night, what do you think it would do for New Jersey if you brought in somebody like John Tortorella and you brought him in as coach and general manager?
No, thank you.
I would say no thank you to that also. But you have to admit, after what he did with Philadelphia this year, it would certainly change the vibe in that room. I'm not a big fan of his tactics, but doing everything towards the player side, we saw that doesn't work.
No, I understand, because I think, you know, talking with some people, I think New Jersey, Buffalo, Ottawa want to follow suit of what Philadelphia did. Now, let's be honest, there were some things that Tortorella did in Philadelphia and that weren't ideal, like scratching your captain and things like that. And look, has he gotten better? Yes, but still. Look, Pete DeBoer has finally evolved and realized that he has to play young players. But again, Dallas is young. He actually had to change his ways. That's why I think like a guy like McClellan, but I don't know. That's why I think Berube seems to be the best fit. But again, if it was Berube, I think it would have been done already. Really do. Maybe. But again, where else are they looking? And do they have a John Cooper someplace? I do believe the Devils do have that, but I don't know if they think he's ready. And I think it's Kevin Dineen down in the AHL. I really do think Kevin Dineen, what he's done on the international level with Team Canada, what he's done in the AHL, really is a good fit for this team. However, I don't know if you go down that route. I think you need somebody that can instill discipline, defensive structure, and get this team to play. And one more thing, I agree with you on this. Tom Fitzgerald has to change things. You also have to realize that certain players that you draft, they're not going to turn into the players you think they're going to be, especially defensively. And I'm talking about Alexander Holtz. He's not a 200-foot player. He's an offensive goal scorer. Make him Lucas Raymond, and you're fine.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and that was one of the criticisms of Lindy Ruff. He was using some players in just the wrong roles. I'll tell you what, and I know this is a long shot. You know who my choice for the next coach of this team would be Scott Stevens.
I know it would be, and I think it would be a great idea to get all those guys back on the staff and back in the room. I was talking with somebody that we both have a mutual acquaintance with, and they're like, you know, how funny would it be you get Stevens in there, Elias, Breland, guys like that who've won cups on the bench in the room all the time saying, hey, this is how we do things around here. Does that change the attitude of this team? Because I think they need to get the Hughes brothers in line.
Well, it certainly should change. I mean, again, and I know it's maybe a long shot, and I'm going to go off the subject for a second here. You and I have talked privately about this, and I think one of the things that this organization really needs to do is they somehow need to, assuming this hasn't been done already, they need to patch things up with Scotty Stevens, get him back in the fold somehow as part of that organization with authority to do something, because you have something that a lot of other organizations don't have. The St. Louis Blues do not have, I'm just using them as an example, they don't have anybody that's got 3 Stanley Cups, one of the best, most feared hitters in the history of the game. And then you have Ken Danico, you've got Elias, you've got Breland, whose jersey should be retired, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And not in the stupid Ring of Honor. And, you don't have that.
No.
You don't have that. And you've got this resource. And, like, again, maybe I'm talking as a fan now, but, like, I don't understand what you are. Listen, unless that relationship is irreparably damaged, and it may be, who knows?
Right.
But, I mean, they can fix the stuff with Marty. They can probably fix this. But, man, I see you've got this resource that you're not using, and I just don't understand why.
I don't get it either.
Even if you make him an assistant coach. I mean, even if you make him, you bring in Berube or Sullivan or whoever, you have him as a coach. That's a resource that not many teams have, and I just think by not doing that, you're missing an opportunity. But this whole year was a missed opportunity for New Jersey.
I 100% was a missed opportunity. Missed opportunity because they had chances to make coaching changes earlier than they did. They could have fixed some things earlier than they did. They didn't use the money that they had when Dougie went down to help this team get to a playoff spot. Guys were hurt. I get it. Injuries aren't an excuse, but they are. But still, you had money to use and you didn't use it. You didn't get it. And then it all goes back to last summer. And they have to fix it, not only with the coach, but you have to get a number 1 goaltender. Whether it's Markstrom, whether it's Omar, whether it's Saros, somebody that can stop the puck and keep it out of the net and protect this team.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest decisions that the franchise has had to make in a while. Boy, any of those names. I mean, yeah, I'll just throw this out to you, too. I was talking to someone this morning, a friend of mine that lives in Toronto, who's actually a Winnipeg Jets fan. Do you think after this off-season's performance that Hellebuck could be on the move?
No.
I
don't think so. I don't think so. Not with the contract kicking in, no trade clause. It would be tough.
I'm just saying that they've got to get this right.
Yeah, they do. They do.
And
they have to get something. Maybe it's Merzlikins. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. But you see, look, and everybody can point to, oh, well, look what Vancouver's doing with Sivos and the Smith because Demko's not there. No. The case is Florida. Bobrovsky stole games for the Florida Panthers against the Tampa Bay Lightning. UC Saros stood on his head in Game 5 for the Nashville Predators to keep this series alive. Jake Ottinger won Game 5 for the Dallas Stars.
He did.
Not number 1 goalies matter.
Yeah.
You have to play one goalie in the playoffs. Unless the guy gets hurt, there is no platooning.
Well, here's something else, Jim. You know what? I know we don't really have time to get into this on this one, but I'll tell you what. Another organization that has some serious issues this summer is Calgary. I was reading an article in one of the Canadian newspapers. I can't remember which one it was now, but I want to give them credit. Where things are not all warm and fuzzy up in Calgary between Markstrom and the Flames management. After that, I mean, you alluded to that in a really well-written article that you had about Markstrom, but he's pissed about not going to New Jersey.
Look, we'll touch on it real quick. Sources I talked to at the time when it was supposed to happen and after, the trade was in place for Markstrom to go to New Jersey. It was all done, and then Flames management and ownership stepped in. Okay? Jacob Markstrom had told the Calgary Flames, do not come to me unless it's real. They went to him. They told him about it. He agreed to it. It was signed off on. And in his mind, he was going to be a New Jersey Devil. And it didn't happen. And now he was mad about it because that's all everybody talked about. He wanted to focus on playing hockey. But instead, he had to talk about this. And again, he had to talk about it. I really do believe Jacob Markstrom has played his last days in Calgary, and I would not be surprised if he ends up back in New Jersey. And I am going to say, Dal Maloney needs to stay out of trade talks because that's what happened.
Well, I mean, if you want to piss off your goaltender and screw up the locker room, that's exactly what he did. I mean, it really should never get to that point. Again, let me take a step back. We're not in the room.
Right.
But I mean, I cannot imagine that someone.
But go real quick. But when the player comes out on immediate availability at the season end and said he addressed the team after the Tanev trade, saying he was probably getting traded, you can't pull that back.
No, you can't pull it back. And the thing is you shouldn't have anybody go to a player and say that you're probably going to be moved without the powers of that be, giving the kudos to that. That's just organizational dysfunction, really. I mean, what a disaster that is.
Yeah, Calgary's a mess up there. We know what New Jersey's going to be like. We'll see what the watch is on Winnipeg. Very excited. Not heated edition, but we turned the flames up a little bit. No pun intended here. As we're back and better than ever here on the Full Press Hockey Podcast. Again, check it out. Full Press Hockey Podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe. Check it out. Thanks again to Bet Analytics. Again, use the promo code FPH24, 25% off when you sign up. Guys are leading in the gaming industry. Check those out. I'm Jim Biringer. I'm the voice of Full Press Hockey. I do a lot everywhere. Joined by my legendary tag team partner, Fox Media NHL analyst, Bruce Zeman. Bruce, thank you again. So glad to do this again.
Yeah, me too. Talk next week, buddy.
Absolutely. Can't wait to do it again, guys. Full Press Hockey Podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Take care and enjoy the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.